Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. If you need assistance figuring out how to pay your rent during this COVID-19 crisis, you're in the right place. We have experts with us tonight to help you live on the phone, and we look forward to taking your questions. During the call, if you would like to ask a question, simply press 7 on your phone. Now, I will turn the program over to Melanie Couchman, who is one of the founders of Sandy Springs Together. Melanie?
Thank you, Amy. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being a part of tonight's free call. COVID-19 is making it difficult for many people to pay their rent. Tonight, we want to share with you ideas that could help you with your rent payments for the next several months. Now is not the time to feel badly about your situation. Landlords have more money than tenants to ride out this crisis. Tim Franzen with the Housing Justice League is on the line and will share some success stories about how you and your neighbors can approach your landlord to get some rent relief until this crisis passes. At the end of the call, please stay on the line to hear how you can stay connected. Now, here's Tim.
Hey, everybody. My name is Tim Franzen. I'm with like it was said, I was with the Housing Justice League, and I hope that everybody is doing okay tonight and staying safe. I want to, and I have some questions that have been submitted ahead of time, so I'm going to answer all those. But before I do, I just want to kind of briefly go through, our how we're responding to this just massive, unprecedented number of folks in our communities that cannot pay rent. Some of y'all may know that in April, it's been widely reported that 30% of folks living in apartment complexes didn't have April rent. That's across the whole country. That number is expected to double for May. So if you are somebody that doesn't have any rent for May, you are not alone. In fact, there are more people in your situation than are not if you're living in an apartment. And so the reality is there's simply the rate at which our local and state and federal governments and nonprofits are figuring out ways to provide direct relief to people. An example of that is like the $1,200 stimulus check that some people are getting. The reality is that we have not figured out a way as a nation to figure out how to address this systemic issue of so many people out. There are not enough rental assistance programs to cover folks that are out of rent. So what do we do as a society? Well, we set up a hotline, and it basically is a system to help you navigate negotiations with your landlord, either individually or as a group. We're finding a lot more success when people are able to organize as a group. I want to make sure that people have the hotline phone number. I know that it's on the Sandy Springs Together website, but if you have a pen and paper handy, just in case you forget anything that I'm saying, I'm going to give you this number where there are volunteers on standby to walk people through the process. The number is 404-946-9953. That's 404-946-9953. On the other end of that call of the phone is a trained volunteer with Housing Justice League that is trained to walk folks through a number of different scenarios. Whether you're somebody who has no money for rent or just some money for rent, we also have a growing resource guide that helps people identify, food delivery and, basic essential supplies. So for the person that has no rent money, when folks call the hotline, we sort of, if somebody has no rent money, we help walk them through our letter system. We have these form letters that we've put together that are addressed to landlords. So you would take one of our letters, edit it to make it appropriate for your situation. And each one of those letters is signed by 15 organizations. So we want landlords to know that when you send these letters in, that you're not just sending this, on your own behalf, that the community really has eyes on what the landlord's going to do next. Now, in many cases, landlords have been very open to negotiating, and we've gotten some really interesting success stories from, we had one landlord allow folks to stay as long as they help do some maintenance. And they said, well, we don't have any equipment to do the maintenance. And so the landlord went out and bought that. And so, we've had we just had a success story yesterday. There's a complex in Marietta, and it was a low income complex, but didn't have any kind of subsidy. And so those are really the folks that are in sort of have the least amount of protections available. And so using our letter, we were able to organize half of the complex, and really you don't have to even organize everybody in the complex, but if you get a nice percentage, they had 50% of their, tenants organized, and they sent this letter in, and the landlord agreed to cut rent in half until folks go back to work. And he agreed to April and May and to reconsider on June. And so when you're hearing a lot of people right now say we're all in this together, this is what we're all in this together looks like in action when it comes to housing. Now is not a time.
Tim?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is Amy Morton. I just really quickly wanted to remind everyone who's in the room that if they have a question, press 7 on your phone so we can put you in queue. Go ahead. I really apologize for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. In fact, that is a good segue for me to stop, and because I'm realizing I already have some of these questions here that I definitely want to answer. Just to wrap up the hotline, though, if that initial letter doesn't work, then we do have room to escalate, and we sort of take that as a case-by-case basis. But that would be where, y'all doing this important work in Sandy Springs would sort of come in, would really help us figure out what are the sort of, pressures, what are the relationships you have on city council, local government. We have a really strong response system in Atlanta and Albany right now, but we haven't developed a strong one in Sandy Springs. We haven't had a lot of cases, but we will cross that bridge if we get there. I do want to transition into answering some of these questions. I have a few. I'm going to read them out loud because a lot of these are going to pertain to a lot of folks. So here's the first one. It says, I went to your website, Housing Justice League, and saw that your formed partnership with tenant associations, but all of them seem to be in Atlanta. Do you do work in Sandy Springs? When it comes to organizing tenant associations, we have typically been an organization that focuses on Atlanta. As a result of this crisis and the fact that there's not a lot of organizations that do what we do, we are expanding that to encompass the whole state of Georgia at this time. We have about 100 volunteers that are helping us do that, so we absolutely can walk people through the process of developing a tenant association or a tenant union, and we can do all that work remotely over the phone. The next question is, what do you do at monthly meetings? How do we join? And how do we get started? So that's referring to our Housing Justice League meetings. Right now, we are not having them until we feel that it is safe and responsible to have people gather. But that's our monthly mass meeting, is where tenants from around the metro area, and some come as far as Marietta, not Sandy Springs yet, come to work through issues together. People bring the stuff that they're dealing with on the building level, and sometimes tenants just like to organize social events as well.
And Tim, if I could interrupt you for a minute,
please.
I think that's the role that Sandy Springs Together wants to help the residents here in Sandy Springs be a part of. So we are going to be working with your organization to help the tenants here so they don't have to travel to Marietta or downtown. We'll be working with your organization to get that going here, so that's right here, convenient to them.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so here's some questions that we're going to get into more questions that are more general for everybody. When I am late on rent, my landlord piles on huge late fees. The fees really pile up. Are they legal? Is it possible to get them lowered or canceled? Okay, so first off, are they legal? It depends. They're not allowed to charge more than 10% of the rent on any single fee, we would really need to look at each individual situation to say whether it's legal or not. Really, you're not supposed to be. A late fee should not be more than 10% of the rent. I can tell you that. Is it possible to get them lowered or canceled? Absolutely. That has been one of the basic demands that we have made to property management companies and complex owners, and that is something that but what it takes is organizing. It takes a handful of tenants. It doesn't take every tenant in the building. It takes a handful of tenants to, develop a voice of the complex and to really make those demands. I think where we come in handy is that we can really sort of bring community eyes to the situation, and we can make sure that the landlord knows that a lot of people are, paying attention, and that pressure has gone a long way for us. It says, what has Georgia as a state done to protect renters due to the economic downturn from the coronavirus? What can they do?
Tim,
yes.
Tim, if I could interrupt you for a moment, we have several questions from people who are listening, and if I could go to those while they're on the phone, if you don't mind. The first one is from Jasmine, who asks, I've been furloughed, which I've never experienced. I'm also still waiting on payments from the government. What should I do? Does that fall under your guidelines?
Yeah. So essentially, anybody that doesn't have the ability to pay rent falls under our guidelines. The difficult thing to hear when we're saying we're offering assistance is that we cannot pay your rent. But what we can do is work with you to open a line of communication between you and your landlord in a way that, makes it clear that you're not by yourself, that you're not alone. And that effort becomes more powerful when it's connected with one of your neighbors. That being said, our hotline system is also set up for folks that don't know anybody in their complex and just want to negotiate on their own behalf. The important thing to do now is not to wait till May 1st, which I know is literally around the corner, but to start making contact with landlords immediately. Using our language gives you a head start. You don't have to create something. It's already there. And if you get a nasty response, then we can be there to work with you.
And we also have a question from Bryant, and I want to take this opportunity to remind everyone who's on the call that if you'd like to ask a question, all you have to do is press 7 on your phone, and we will get your question queued up to answer. The question is, Bryant says that he lives in a privately owned set of townhomes in the back of Carroll Manor subdivision and has contacted the landlord about plans for taking funds off the rent to be used for other needs. He's retired, daughter's battling breast cancer, who passed, caring for an 11-year-old, is a teacher, no family. Landlord refused to do anything to help. What sort of remedies or solutions are available during a time like this for her?
Yeah, that's a terrible situation, and I hate to hear that. I think it's the folks that are living in those in a single family home, renting from a smaller landlord. That can be really difficult. But I can tell you this: this week we've had 2 situations where somebody was renting in a single family home in a neighborhood from a small landlord, and both of them attempted to resolve the situation on their own, and the landlord said no. But once they got letters that were, signed by Housing Justice League and 15 other organizations, they both immediately made deals. So this is not something that we can promise, but it is, in a lot of ways, is our way of holding landlords and property management companies accountable to save lives, to save the country, and we've been pretty persuasive. And so, yeah, I would say that using our letters, you may have a different outcome because it's not just you. It's clear that you're not just all alone. Yeah.
And I would like to add something to that, Amy, if it's okay.
Yes, please.
There is an organization here in Sandy Springs called Community Assistance Center. And if this gentleman lives in Carroll Manor, he goes down to Rouseville Road and takes a left, and it's across from the Sandy Springs Diner. And they do have some emergency funds available for people that are meet certain criteria that are needing emergency assistance right now for both utility bills and also for partial rent payments. So they might want to check that out also. Community Assistance Center, and they have a food bank also, and their contact information is on the Sandy Springs Together website. We have a banner across the top that is for COVID resources, and if they sort through that, they will find the Community Assistance Center website.
That's extremely helpful information, and we do have several questions that are being screened, but in the meantime, Tim, if you would like to get back to the question that was asked, you were about to answer earlier about the role of state and local government. We would love to hear that. I think the question was, what has Georgia as a state done to protect renters due to the economic downturn from coronavirus? What can they do? What can the city do?
Well, our state has not done a whole lot when it comes to protecting renters. In fact, almost nothing. But there have been some. Our governor has pushed some of the larger financial institutions to do mortgage pauses. 53% of all mortgages in the state are paused, and that's also something that we really look into when we have a landlord that is being given us a hard time. We see if they're one of them, because if they're getting that pause, and one of the problems is that property owners aren't turning over those savings that they're getting to all their tenants. Some of them are still getting a break and demanding rent. So the reality is that there's not enough relief, and we are fighting, and lots of other people are fighting to get more relief. Y'all may be aware of the $1,200 stimulus check. I did look at the Sandy Springs Together website, and y'all have your own sort of resource list there, which is great. We have one too. Correct. And direct people on where to get some rental assistance. The difficult thing that people are experiencing when they call for rental assistance is sometimes, they're finding that there's not a lot left, or there's so many people that are applying that it's difficult. And so ruling out, we really don't want folks to rule out working through our process, even though it's not money in your hand. It's still resident power. It keeps people in place. And at the end of the day, you might have a closer relationship with your neighbors after going through this process.
I think it would be good if both Melanie, if both you and Tim could once again give your website, because we've had a number of people join that may not have heard it. Could you give the address for your websites?
Sure. SandySpringsTogether.org is the address of the organization that's sponsoring this call today. We're a local nonprofit in Sandy Springs, and our focus is on affordable housing, and we're glad that everybody's joining us tonight. Tim, you want to give your address?
Sure. And on the Sandy Springs Together website, you can find information about the letters that I'm talking about, our organizing packet. If you need help, assistance with a difficult landlord that's not working with you, our hotline is open, and we're waiting to get a call from you. It's 404-946-9953. Now, we're only staffing it from 9 to 5, 7 days a week. So if you call outside those times, you can leave a message. And when somebody
thank you, Tim. And I also wanted to mention that Sandy Springs Together has a Facebook page. It's just Sandy Springs Together Facebook.
And we have another question from Yolanda, and it's a two-part question. And the first part of the question is there a place, I think both of you may want to respond to this, is there a place to go to see about assistance? And how would you go about it if the place were closed? That's the first part of the question. And then let's answer that, then I'll go with the second part. So are there places that offer assistance? And if you go there and the place is closed, what might you do?
Well, I guess Sandy Springs, what I want to say is, since Sandy Springs Together is open all the time because we have a website and a Facebook page, so we are always ready and able to answer questions. If you go to the Community Assistance Center, you need to go to their website because they are honoring the social distancing, and so they're doing all their intake over the phone. But you go to their website first, and their website is rcac.org. But if you go to the Sandy Springs Together website, you can find it there also. They do all their intake over the phone right now, so that's the easiest and fastest way. So I think they're open 5 days a week or 7 days a week, 9 to 6 or something like that. So you shouldn't have a problem, Yolanda, getting in touch with them.
Thank you, Melanie. Tim, did you have anything to add to that part of the question?
No. I mean, besides if I wouldn't drive anywhere before making the call first.
Right. The second part of the question, I think we start with you, Tim. It's how do you go about handling rent increases? Yolanda's contract is up for negotiation soon, and her rent has jumped every time it has come up for negotiation. Is that legal? And if so, is there a set amount they can increase it by? Is there any recourse?
Yeah, I mean, in the state of Georgia, in the state of Georgia, there is no law against when it comes to increasing rent. We've only recently won a legislative fight to protect the right to organize, which is great. It means you can't get kicked out for organizing in your complex or complaining about conditions. But negotiating a new lease is exactly that. It's a negotiation. And so what you can do if you don't like the deal that they're giving you is, well, one, you don't have to sign, you don't have to enter into it. But if you're being treated unfairly, then, I think that that speaks to this need for, essentially everybody that's paying rent in a complex, y'all are wealth generators. You're creating wealth for folks. And sometimes these folks get it twisted in their head and think that they're doing you a favor. And because folks oftentimes, especially in America right now, oftentimes feel isolated and we're not connected to our neighbors. But when tenants unite, even a portion of them, unite in a building and negotiate for a fairer, safer living environment, it works because, it's kind of like clarifying the relationship. Hey, we're here building wealth for you. We're going to be treated right, and we're going to be treated fairly. It's hard to do that as an individual if you're living in a building with tons of folks, but when you're united, you become kind of this unstoppable force. And the owners of the property realize, these are the only reason I have all these money is these people are paying. And now they're demanding that you can't raise rent, or you got to fix this, you're going to make this safer. So it makes sense.
So Tim, oh, I'm sorry, Amy. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Melanie.
I was going to say, you are saying then, in the past, I know we've talked to residents that have been afraid to come together as a group because they didn't feel that they had the right to do that, or that they would be in trouble with the landlord. But what you're saying is that now Georgia's changed the law, and that they're allowed to do that. Is that what you're saying? Could you say a little more about that?
Sure. We fought for years to get a bill passed in the Georgia State Capitol to protect tenants' rights to organize and their right to complain, because prior to that it was legal to evict somebody for complaining. The House bill is called 346, passed last year. It's called the Healthy Homes Bill, and it lists a couple of activities as protected. One of those activities is tenant organizing, complaining on social media or in any fashion about conditions of the building, and making local and state officials aware of unhealthy conditions. Those are all things you used to be able to be evicted for. Now that it is illegal, and what we've worked on this year is testing that law. And so we had one of our complexes, they tried to evict one of our tenant leaders, and we were able to successfully use House Bill 346 to stop that eviction from happening. And now that tenant leader continues to be a tenant leader at their complex.
Well, that's good news, because I think before, in the past, tenant rights have been non-existent in this state. So that's really good news to know that tenants are now going to have rights. Yeah,
it's a start. We got a long way to go, but it's a start.
Okay.
Oh, Melanie, I had a question for you. This it is simple, but would like to know, what does Sandy Springs Together do? Your organization, what does it do?
Well, we are a nonprofit, and we've been working to educate the community about the need to include housing that is affordable for all income levels in Sandy Springs. I don't know, Tim, if you're aware of this, and there may be people on the call that are not aware, but Sandy Springs has been looking at redeveloping the north end of the city for a couple of years, and their focus has been on much more expensive housing, and we have been holding them accountable, making sure that they are remembering that there are many, many people in this city that do not make $65,000 or $100,000, and that they provide a very important fabric to our city, and that we need to make sure that they have housing that they can afford. Over 50%, Amy, over 50% of the people that live in our city live in apartments. And so with that kind of ratio, to Tim's point, the more people we can bring together to exercise their tenant rights, the more power and the stronger their voice is going to be. And we will be able to make some impact on not only apartment rents within their own communities, but also just in terms of the whole community, and making sure that tenants are not dismissed and discouraged the way they have been in the past.
Thank you. Let me just remind everyone who is on the call that if you would like to ask a question, please press 7 on your phone, and you'll be able to ask your question. Melanie, to follow up on that, there's a question about will they be tearing down apartments? This person has heard that the city may be tearing down apartments. Is that something that you expect to have happen?
Well, the city will probably not tear down apartments, but what they can do is they can make it attractive for others to tear them down, which is why we need more people living in the apartments to come together and get involved. Like I said, over half the people that live in Sandy Springs live in apartments, and we really want them, we meaning Sandy Springs Together, want them to have a place at the table. So your voices are needed, and we need to overcome the present COVID crisis, and hopefully Tim is going to help us do that. But then we need to come together to address rising rents and to address this perception that the city has that they can come in and incentivize developers and apartment owners to build something other than apartments where there currently are apartments. So we need to count on everybody to help us do that.
We have just a few more minutes. Thank you. Tim, another question. Some of my friends are undocumented and scared to become a part of any group. What would you say about that?
Yeah. First off, I may not have made it clear that our and this is not necessarily answering the undocumented question entirely, but our whole hotline system, especially if you go to our website, it is bilingual, and that includes the volunteers on the other end of the line. We have a Spanish speaker on every shift, and we are partnering with a number of organizations that are centered around undocumented folks. What do we do to mitigate risk factors? And we do everything that we can. We consult with the Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights, GLAR, on protocol. Of course, police really aren't supposed to be showing up and calling ICE, but, you never know. If a landlord's aware, he certainly could call ICE. There is a separate organization that does some work around ICE raids. But I would not discourage, I would really encourage folks to call us with those difficult situations. And, we think about the many different ways that people have housing in Sandy Springs. There's so many different ways that people have arranged their housing. And so a lot of the cases that we get are very unique. And I can tell you that we spend a lot of time, trying to brainstorm creative solutions to some of these problems. So I would encourage you to call the hotline, or as I see your friend, to call the hotline. And we are there waiting. And somebody's documentation status is not going to affect the way that they're treated by us. If anything, they'll be given more priority.
And Tim, you've given the hotline number several times, but could you share it one more time as people who come in and out?
Sure. Yeah. And again, it's bilingual, and the number is 404-946-9953. That's 404-946-9953.
And one, I think, probably final question for you, which is a very important question, is there any minimum notice my landlord has to give me before being evicted? I'm behind on April's rent and probably am not going to be able to make May's rent.
Okay. So the first thing that's going to happen if there's an eviction process is that you're going to get a notice to vacate. Like they may call, the landlord may call and try to fix, but if he doesn't call at all, you'll get a thing that's called a notice to vacate. That has no legal merit at all. It's just part of the process. They have to make you aware. It's not the same as an eviction notice. The next step is the eviction has to be filed. And now they may be able to file that eviction in Sandy Springs, but until the statewide judicial order is lifted, which I think is May 13th, they won't be able to process any eviction. Once they're able to process it, you'll get a notice on the door that's tacked on the door that's from a marshal. It's not going to be from your landlord, and it's going to look real official. It's going to be the legit thing. If you don't answer it, then you got 2 weeks. If you do answer it, you can usually buy yourself an additional week if the only reason that you're being evicted is not having money. That'll be 3 weeks. Now, it is important. I do want to say this, that if we're seeing a real backlog on evictions, they are not going to be able to do all of them in any kind of timely fashion. And so we don't want to see an eviction get on anybody's record, but I do want to say it is going to take a tremendous amount of time for these evictions to, all go through. And there is going to be an effort, including by us and many others, to try to get a lot of these things dropped, just because what we're seeing filed already is insane and would take a couple of years to actually evict everybody. I mean, that's how we're talking, 30% of the rent force or the workforce, like getting evictions filed on. It's just not mathematically. A lot of what we're doing and what we all need to do is bring these landlords into reality. It's a mathematical equation. So do not mistake a notice to vacate for an eviction notice. If anybody gets one of those and you're scared about it, call that hotline number. But it is not an eviction notice. It bears no legal weight when it comes to putting you out.
Very helpful. And Melanie, we are getting close to the end of our time, but I have a follow-up for you, and I think it's important. The caller would like to know how she can get involved with Sandy Springs Together.
Well, the easiest way, Amy, is for them to go to our website, sandyspringstogether.org, and go to the Contact Us tab at the top of the page and go down to the bottom. And I was actually going to ask everybody that's on this call to do that, because once we hang up tonight, we have no way of contacting you unless you go to our website. And we want to hear from you. We want to know what you thought about the questions tonight, if there's other topics you'd like to cover, if you'd like to have us do this again and invite your friends and neighbors, we would love to do that. But we won't know if that's what you want unless we hear from you. So if you'll please go to our website, sandyspringstogether.org, put the words rent relief in the message box, and make sure you include your phone number so we can reach out to you. We appreciate everybody being on the line tonight. And thank you so much for your participation. And please, everybody remember that together we have power to change, but we need to be together. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of those who've been with us to listen. Thank you for being with us tonight. We will certainly do this again. Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.